Good afternoon. I'm Julie Menin, and I'm a board member of the Municipal Art Society and the former chair of Community Board 1, and I'm so delighted to be here today. As you probably know, one of the themes of this MAS Summit is resilience, and that's what I'm going to focus the 2 minutes that I've been allotted to speak about. Really, one of the themes that we want to get out of this summit is the idea of how our city is economically, socially, and environmentally resilient. And I think perhaps one of the best examples of that is to look at Lower Manhattan, the community that I've had the pleasure of representing for the last 7 years. If you look back almost 11 years ago at what happened in Lower Manhattan, we lost 60,000 jobs, 40,000 residents left the neighborhood, and many pundits counted the community down and out. But we've been able to rebuild, and now I'm proud to say that Lower Manhattan is the fastest growing residential neighborhood in the city of New York, with 30,000 new residents. We're the 4th largest commercial business district in the country, and we're one of the few areas in New York City that's actually experiencing job growth. So what did we do downtown, and how can we use these lessons to go citywide with some of these programs? Well, first of all, one of the things we focused on was infrastructure, in particular building new schools. We were able to build 3 new K-8 public schools in Lower Manhattan, PS 276 in Battery Park City, which is actually the city's first green school, as well as PS 397, and a new school to be built on Peck Slip. And really, in large part because of that, we're seeing such an influx of residents come into Lower Manhattan because of the terrific public schools we have downtown. In addition, we focused on parks and open space. A project that Community Board 1 initiated about 11 years ago was a redevelopment of the East River waterfront. And if you come to that area now, you can see that project really in progress, and some of it has been completed. In terms of affordable housing, we instituted a rezoning of Northern Tribeca with city planning that gave a bonus for developers to build affordable housing on site. And all of these various things I mentioned have helped to really boost the residential population in Lower Manhattan. In terms of the business environment, some of the programs that we felt worked very well, besides, of course, the grant programs for businesses downtown, were clearly improving the transportation infrastructure in Lower Manhattan. And we're seeing that now with the PATH station and the Fulton Street Transit Center. And by really investing in these large-scale transportation projects, it is, in fact, one of the reasons why we're seeing the number of job growth that we see in Lower Manhattan. So I mentioned some of these examples to just say this is what has worked in what was a very arduous situation for our community, and I think really speaks to resilience. So one of the things that we hope that all of you get out of this summit today is to ask, what can we be doing throughout communities citywide to make sure that when communities are facing changes, whether they be positive or negative, that they are able to adapt and to be resilient. And we here at MAS really welcome your thoughts and ideas on that, and I hope you will continue a dialogue with us on that. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sam Roberts and Scott Stringer.
Thank you, Vince Cipolla, the MAS, for this wonderful conference going on for 2 days. Thank you, Scott Stringer, for participating. This segment is a little bit longer than an ordinary segment on New York One News, but we'll do our best to pack as much into it as we possibly can. Mayor Bloomberg reportedly urged you to run for controller instead of mayor and described you as the best in the field. In spite of that endorsement, an informal one, what Bloomberg initiative over the last 11 years do you think you would reverse if you became a citywide elected official?
So, Sam, I want to thank you for being here. And
for that softball.
It's nice that you're starting. I think part of what I think the mayor's legacy is going to be about is about the health initiatives, thinking about a way in which we can grow the city economically. I think what I would argue is that part of what the next mayor has to do in the post-Bloomberg era is think about involving more people at the table when big decisions are made. I think that we've had a top-down management style, which City Hall says people have to do. And I would argue that that sometimes has a positive impact because you want a strong leader. But I think we have to engage in a process of community-based planning, where people do have a say of what their neighborhood's going to look like, how we plan for the future of this city. Many of the proposals that are put forth, some are very good, but they're proposals that we react to. And I think we have to look at what other great big cities around the world are doing, like Paris or London, and think about a way to do long-term planning for the city that speaks to the environment, that speaks to the economy, and speaks to the demographic changes that we're going to see in the future.
If there's one thing you could do as mayor or as another citywide elected official to make New York a more livable place, livable very broadly defined, what would it be?
Well, I think through the lens of community-based planning, I think part of what we're learning about from people who want to come here is that folks come to New York City because they want to do business here. They love the diversity. You know, people from here come from 200 countries. We speak 170 different languages. We have a special sauce and a certain mojo that people want to strive for. So the question for us is, how can we continue to be a magnet city? Richard Florida wrote a great book, Who's Your City? And in it, he argues that the biggest decision a young person may make in their life is not what they're going to do in terms of their profession, who their life partner may be. The biggest decision a young person makes is where they're going to live. And that decision has always benefited New York because people want to live here. So the job of a mayor or the next mayor is to really do two things. Keep the city competitive on the world stage. So we have to diversify our economy. Wall Street is good. High tech may be better. And we have to think about how we prepare the next generation of jobs here. But we also have to remember that people want to come here because they want to live in our distinct neighborhoods. And we have to remember that while we're being competitive on the world stage, how do we plan at the community level to protect and preserve our wonderful, wonderful communities that we call New York City?
We've had 3 debates so far in the national election, another one coming up Monday on foreign policy. What we didn't hear in any of those debates were the words urban, poor, cities, and maybe except for one passing reference, guns. If the president, the next president, whoever he is, calls you up and says, what is the one thing I can do to help New York, what would it be?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, part of what is lacking is this discussion about urban America. And when you think about the trend, people are no longer growing up in cities and wanting to go to the suburbs, right? People are doing the opposite. People are all over the world in rural communities saying, I want to dream to come to New York City. I want to live where the action is. I want to live where this vibrant economy is. And I want to live in healthy big cities. So truth is, we're going to finish this presidential election and nobody has a plan for urban America, even though I think by the year 2050, there's going to be a seismic shift of people coming to cities all over the country. And yet we haven't had this debate. We don't have a great society plan. There's no new frontier about New York.
So if Barack Obama called you up and said, look, I'm going to get reelected, what do you want from me?
Well,
if you're the next mayor, if you're the next citywide elected official of New York, what can I do for you?
You could start by giving us our fair share. We send more money to Albany and and Washington that we get back. And if you look at the city budget, we have cut it to the bone. We need to generate revenue. Sometimes we have to expand our economy, but I think we've given up on Washington as a vehicle to help New York City. And quite frankly, part of what the next mayor has to do is recognize that we have a very skilled governor who understands the way to play chess with Albany and how skilled he is. We need a mayor who doesn't play checkers, but plays chess also. And part of that is figuring out how we're going to bring resources into the city. The second thing we have to do is we can't just rely on the federal government and Albany. We have to take matters into our own hands. So when people talk about transportation, which is the key to economic development in the city, if you can't expand our transportation base, then you certainly can't create new businesses and accommodate the 1 million people who are going to come to the city by the year 2035. So I propose, and I think we should have a bigger discussion on this, rather than continue to raise fares, we should start thinking about how to seed a transportation infrastructure bank in this city to build out a 5-borough transportation plan. Here's how it would work. I'll tell you in 2 minutes. We have
1 minute.
There's no commercials. Here's what I would do. I would take the mortgage recording tax that is paid on real estate transactions. That tax fluctuates. In good times, it's 1.5 billion. In bad times, it's 500 million. I would shift the mortgage recording tax that's used to operate the MTA. I would shift it from the operating side to the capital side, because that revenue could leverage billions of dollars for transportation expansion. And I would replace the operating side of that with one clarion challenge to Albany that a mayor gets when they get elected. And I would replace the operating money by bringing back the commuter tax and finally making the city whole. We've got to bring back the commuter tax, but we've got to seed an infrastructure bank to build out our capital projects, and we've got to do that.
Most people would say the commuter tax is like Charlie on the MTA. He will never return. But one of the things that has been proposed is congestion pricing, both in terms of congestion, traffic, but also as a source for revenue. Would you support that, or tolling the East River bridges?
Well, I supported the experiment of congestion pricing when first proposed, but here's why it went in the wrong direction. See, when we talk about community-based planning, we can't just have community-based planning in Manhattan. We have to have community-based planning throughout the city. The next way we get a transportation plan for this town is by going to people who live in the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island and say, what do you think? We cannot go to people in Staten Island or in Brooklyn and say, we would like you to get out of your cars, take 2 trains and a bus to get to Midtown. They're not going to do it, and it doesn't work. We have to come up with a transportation infrastructure bank that says to our brothers and sisters in all the boroughs, let's build out a 5-borough transportation plan. Let's have bus rapid transit. Let's build new subways. Let's challenge ourselves to see this infrastructure bank. Then we can have a conversation with people about transportation alternatives. Obviously, the way in which we're going to travel in the city is going to change. But look at what challenges we have. And you're the expert on these issues. 1 million more people are going to be here by 2035. The senior population is going to grow some 44% by, I think, the year 2040. And by 2025, I can't guarantee this, but by 2025, Mike Bloomberg may not run for re-election, and we're going to have to talk about all of these issues.
That's right, and out of our own pockets. Sometime I'd like to get back to the chess and checkers metaphor and ask you who the pawns are, but we'll skip that for now. You've said that 700,000 stops and frisks a year are too many. That is a livability issue for a lot of people in the city, particularly in the Black and Hispanic community. How many is not too many? And do you support the legislation in the council, or would that hamstring the police?
So let me start off by talking about, I was born and raised in the city. I grew up here, as a teenager in the 70s when the city was on the edge of bankruptcy. And I don't want to go back to that time period when there were 2,100 murders and the 8 train, which was my train, was like a rolling crime scene back then. So nobody thinks we should go back. I'm actually a law and order Democrat. I do think we have to keep New York a big, safe city. But I have to tell you, we have to be tough on crime, but we also have to be smart on crime. And 800,000 stops, resulting in 85% of those stops are people who are stopped are African American, Latino. And 99.9% of the time, Sam, no gun is found, and 95% of the time, no arrest is made. So here we are with our limited resources. We are stopping people, dividing people based on race, racially profiling, and we're not getting any guns off the street, and we're causing this terrible schism in our communities. So there are a lot of initiatives that have been put forth in the council. We're going to have to work to see which ones work, which ones go too far, and to create a balance. But I must tell you, we have to mend stop and frisk. And the reason I was one of the first elected officials who looks like me to stand up on this issue is because all New Yorkers have to be concerned when one group of people are targeted. Now, that doesn't make you weak on crime. I think it makes you smart on crime, because you can shift resources to where it will do the most good. And there's some amazing programs in Boston and Chicago, all new ways of fighting crime, targeting the people who are causing the crime, and not randomly going after kids who are African American and Latino, and they have done nothing except walk down the street. Maybe their pants were a little low, but they've done nothing wrong.
You're in luck. I think we have time for one last question, and this goes to the question of the fact that the next mayor is going to inherit major deficits, lack of funding in terms of stimulus money, a state that doesn't seem either equipped or willing to bail the city out. Are there certain categories of services we simply can no longer afford?
Well, I think part of what we need is a real Albany and federal strategy. Part of what we have to do is figure out how to expand our tax base. Part of what we have to do is recognize that we have to continue, even in difficult times, to make the kind of investments in our children so that we have an educated workforce that will meet the demands of what will be the high-tech economy. So a couple things that we have to invest in first. One, we have to get in there and talk about early Head Start. We have to think about ways. You can't just raise taxes in every category you want to expand. I proposed using social impact bonds the way the mayor did on Roosevelt, on Rikers Island. Why can't we target the SIBs for early education? Because that's, if we're going to help people who got untracked, let's make sure our young kids don't get untracked, so let's invest in them early. And then we have to think about what the next economy is going to be. Here's one thing that I think we have to address on the federal level. Right now, we are fighting to expand universities. I've been able to do that. The Techion Cornell Engineering School is going to be amazing and important. But here's what we do. Students come here to go to our universities, tens of thousands, and they come on their student visas. We educate them. We give them the best we have. And you know what happens? The day they graduate from our universities, we throw them out of the country. They go to India and they become our competitors. We have got to have an immigration reform policy that allows for more H-1B visas, because otherwise we are training people only to kick them out of the country. That makes no sense to me. So there are these issues that will confront the next administration. We have to be strategic about this, because ultimately the way you improve the economy is by expanding it.
Scott Stringer, thanks for joining us. Thanks to all of you for coming.
Thank you very much.